breaks my heart to actually say this.
It's maybe the most catastrophic transfer window in recent memory.
Yeah, it's an amazing example of falling upwards. I'm very, very surprised by this deal, to be honest.
Welcome back to Monday Vibes, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a fantastic lineup for you guys today for quite possibly the penultimate Monday Vibes of the season, sadly. But don't worry, we'll be bringing you something else transfer related for the summer. Joining me today is Dougie Critchley and Michael McCubbin. Dukes, how's your weekend, my friend?
It was very good, thank you. It was very good. Yeah, saw a few friends, had a poker night, but it just felt like a very dramatic weekend of football action. Yeah. Transfer-wise, the FA Cup final, Toby Alderweireld's last-minute winner for Antwerp as well, Barcelona women. It was just a great weekend of action.
Indeed. McCubbs, how's your weekend, my friend?
Yeah, it was all good aside from the result on Saturday, but not entirely unexpected. So, can't be crying about that too much. Yeah, I agree with Dukes. Yeah, a lot of news this weekend. Feel like the transfer window has kicked off with a bit of a bang. So good, thanks.
Well, you guys have mentioned it. My weekend was right. It wasn't too bad. I spent a bit of it with Dougie watching the FA Cup final.
Don't sound too sad about it.
No, it was all pleasure, mate. The pleasure was all mine, that's for sure. Okay, then, you guys have hinted towards what a weekend it was. Let's get into it and discuss about it. Kicking it off with the FA Cup final, Manchester United versus Manchester City. Man City winning 2-1 on the night, scoring the fastest FA Cup goal in 13 seconds. Dougie, talk me through it a bit, because it felt like within the first 13 seconds this could be an absolute bloodbath.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a start, what a finish by Gundogan, and what a sort of clutch run of form he's been on. I think it's 6 goals and 2 assists in his last 6 games. And that sort of run of form is just one that will be remembered for the rest of his career. Yeah. If he is bowing out at Man City, what a way to go out. Obviously the big one next weekend as well, but 2 out of 3 done for Man City. And I thought they weren't probably at their most fluid in the final third, and credit to United for that. But neither side I thought were at their best attacking-wise, to be honest. I thought Man United were a little bit blunt. But City, composure, in the midfield area. Stones making such a big difference in midfield again. And the second goal was not as beautiful. It was a little bit more scrappy. But I thought the fact that they could have had another goal, City, if it wasn't for that offside call, and I thought their penalty, United's, was quite fortunate. That Grealish handball. So
what do you think, Mikey, as a United fan, of that penalty? Because there was a lot of talk after it. Grealish actually afterwards coming out and being like, "What am I meant to do? I've gone up for the header. I've missed the header. My eyes are closed, and it's hit my hand." How do you feel, obviously, from a United perspective?
I mean, from any perspective, really, it's just not a penalty. But it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's just like this season we've seen so many. Yeah. What's mad is that it's not even the harshest it's not even among the harshest that we've seen this season. Like, it's essentially now it's like if you're jumping up, if your arm is like flailing or whatever, then that seems to count as being deliberate or whatever. Even though you're going at some momentum, even though you're really close to the ball. This is what I don't quite get with it. It feels like the kind of proximity argument about like that seems to have been really blurred, like blurred more by VAR than before, which I find weird. You look back to that Tomori, the penalty that Tomori gave away against Napoli in the Champions League, even though he was falling down. Like, I thought that was always meant to be a real kind of objective rule that, like, falling to the ground, if your arm is in the way because you're breaking your fall, then that doesn't count. And it feels like the Grealish one is a bit of a kind of example of somewhere else where handball has become a little bit more confused. So I would it's not a penalty in my eyes, but we've seen kind of 4 or 5 of those given in the Premier League this season. It was fortunate, and it came at a really good time in the game for United because they were just coming back in to the game a little bit. The kind of patterns of play in the final third were improving. Because after that Gundogan goal, that kind of 20 minutes after that, it just looked like City were going to absolutely wipe the floor. But United did come back into it, and that kind of came at a crucial point, I think, because I think the move that led up to that Grealish handball was probably the best play we'd seen from United at that point. and it felt like a bit of a wasted chance. Turned out, the call went United's way, and Bruno was able to slot home. But it definitely wasn't a handball. So I think United were lucky at that moment to have got that call, and it could have dictated the rest of the game, because up until Gundogan's second, it was quite in the balance. Like City were obviously the better team, but like Dukes was saying, I think United did deal with them in some key areas. And Bernardo Silva was very quiet. Jack Grealish, has obviously been one of City's best players in the second half of the season, but he was almost completely silenced. And it was really just in the middle of the park where City had superiority. Christian Eriksen hasn't really looked like the same player since coming back from injury, has he? John Stones, arguably the best player on the pitch, I thought, like both in a defensive sense and in a build-up sense. He was just magnificent. Gundogan, obviously, in such amazing form, and De Bruyne was excellent too. But that front three, even Haaland, was pretty quiet throughout the game. Had that quite decent effort in the first half, but probably should have tried to bear down on goal given he was kind of through. I think that's where it was won. Was kind of Stones and Gundogan, I think, for City, and also the fact they just defended really well. I think it was, like Duke said, I think neither attack was brilliant, but ultimately City were they were the better defending side.
They did what they had to do over the past couple of games, and that's what the past couple of months have been like, really, with City when they were behind Arsenal. Let's talk a little bit about the City then. Obviously, this is the second one ticked off. They've got the third one coming this weekend. There is a high possibility, because they win the treble as well. I feel like it's kind of come out of the blue this season with Manchester City in this treble, because for ages, because Arsenal, and it might have been because of the fact that Arsenal were leading the Premier League, all of the eyes were on Arsenal, all of the headlines were all about Arsenal, and it wasn't about City maybe being one of the greatest teams ever, or going on to possibly do this treble. And then suddenly, with, say, the last month, we've all gone, oh, City could do this pretty easily, pretty quickly. They're facing Inter Milan this weekend. Does it feel like this is their best ever chance?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's also partly what you're talking about. Is not just Arsenal playing so well. I actually think City were just playing quite badly for there. And there were legitimate arguments that Haaland hadn't made them a better side. Obviously, his goal scoring in the first half of the season was brilliant, but they did look a bit clunky. And in many parts of the season, they haven't been as fluid as they were, particularly in 17-18 or 18-19, with I think that Sane, Sterling, Aguero front three was probably their most fun to watch, and it sort of clicked the easiest. Whereas this year, I think there's been different players that have popped up at different times, but they are a far more physical side. They rarely let a side back into it in the same way that they did 3-4 years ago. Like, their Champions League exit has really been conceding like clutch of goals, like 3 or 4 in a short amount of time, whether that's against Real Madrid, they did against Liverpool once, I think against Spurs in that 18-19 quarter-final as well. But they just seem so much more robust and prepared to deal with any situation. I would say I would underestimate Inter Milan at your peril. I don't think it will be as one-sided as people think. Inter Milan, have won back-to-back Coppa Italias. They've won a league recently. They did really well in the Champions League last year. I think they gave Liverpool, a peak Liverpool, a really good game over 2 legs as well. And they made short work of AC Milan in the semi-finals, when everyone thought that was going to be, a game filled with so much emotion and it was going to be really tight. I thought Inter were by far the better side, and they've got 2 players, particularly Lautaro Martinez and Romelu Lukaku, who are just at the top of their game right now.
And there is something as well with, like, I know it's so cliche, but like in the Champions League final, anything can happen.
Absolutely.
Like overnight, I think there's this consensus. I think with Man City, beating them over a season is tough. It's not easy, but beating them over 90 minutes is quite possible.
Well, you guys did it as underdogs.
Well, 100%. I think partially that was helped as well, obviously, by Pep not playing a DM as well, and who knows whether Pep will overthink it and suddenly Rodri's not playing and it's only John Stones.
I don't think he will on this occasion, though. It feels like he's nailed his starting 11.
It does feel like that. It does feel like that, especially as well with a lot of the players going into this final too. It kind of does feel inevitable. I mean, Mike, I don't know, have you got any...
I think with Pep, tactics wise, like, he just got it spot on, didn't he, against Real in the semi-final. I think even on the weekend, that City team, they just kind of did what needed to be done. It wasn't particularly amazing. It wasn't that free flowing, but they did what they needed to do, and that 3 at the back system just helps them in that regard. Kyle Walker was excellent. Just I don't know, there's just yeah, it feels like this City team is maybe a bit more of a cup team than the ones we've seen in the past, and it kind of makes sense that they've reached an FA Cup and a Champions League final. Like this is the first time that they've actually had a shot at the treble. So yeah, I think it would be silly to bet against City, but I agree with Dukes. Like I think Inter will give City. I think Inter will pose more interesting questions of City than United did at the weekend for sure, and probably more than what Real Madrid posed them in the semi-finals. Just because, like you're saying, a really good cup team, and I think one of the reasons why United were so blunt on Saturday is because it was a pretty fair representation of where the squad is at this moment in time. Playing with a not fully fit Rashford, let's face it, at centre forward. That there were no real, Weghorst was the only centre forward on the bench. Inter Milan have 3 very high caliber centre forwards to choose from in Lukaku, Dzeko and Lautaro Martinez. They've got very well established wing backs. Their midfield has adapted really well to challenges this season. Okay, Çalhanoğlu as a kind of holding midfielder is probably could struggle for sure against De Bruyne, but I don't know. Yeah, I think this is this Inter Milan team is really interesting, and I think particularly in that kind of centre forward position, I think that City back line will have a lot to answer to.
Okay, well, you kind of hinted towards it there about Manchester United. I saw Joe kind of say 67 games. You could tell this United team played a lot of games. That is what happens when you want to be a good side and make your part in competitions. But let's talk a little bit, rather than the game in Manchester United, I want to talk about one of the links that happened as well. We've seen it over the past few days. Absolutely crushing for me. Breaks my heart to actually say this, but there is a huge possibility that Mason Mount could be going on to join Manchester United in the summer. It did come out that supposedly personal terms had been reached. Now, what that might be, we don't know exactly. That could be close to £300,000 a week.
Wow.
Definitely plus 210 for sure. Now, currently it seems that United put in a £50 million bid. Chelsea rejected that. I think Chelsea are looking more towards the level of, say, 70 million, which is a lot of money to get for someone with 1 year left on his contract. And I'll be honest, lads, if Chelsea let him go, it's absolutely crushing from a fan perspective.
Yeah.
But if I take out all emotion, to get £70 million for someone who wants close to £300,000 a week with only 1 year left on his deal is good business. Right, Diggs?
Yes, it is. And on the basis of his performances this season, you'd say yes. But we just know what Mount can do at his best. And I don't think it's the worst deal from a United perspective, given his age, given the fact he won't struggle probably to adapt to the club. He might, it's a change of system, maybe a change of role, but it shouldn't be too difficult for him to get used to the ways of the dressing room and the ways of the club. And he's been at a big club in the past. This is maybe just a slight step up in terms of history and expectation. But he's used to delivering for Chelsea, and up until this year, been pretty faultless in his entire Chelsea career. The thing with Mount is, it feels like with Kovacic also leaving, you are losing potentially 2 of your better players over the last 3-4 years. And, you need to sell a lot of players. You need to make some money. It's the start of a new era under Pochettino. But I think if Pochettino, I haven't spoken to him, obviously, but I imagine that if he had an ideal shaped squad for the start of next year, he'd have a happy, fit and on-form Mason Mount, and he'd have probably a happy Kovacic as well.
Well, all reports are saying that Pochettino wants Mount. He wants him there. There was this whole talk, wasn't there, about he wants to create this English spine, and part of that was Levi Colwill, and part of that was Mason Mount. And I think you're completely right. Like, if he does join Manchester United, it wouldn't shock me if next season we suddenly see so many more people talking about how good is Mason Mount in this midfield for Manchester United. And if you look at the 2 squads right now, I can also understand from Mason Mount's point of view of going, well, their squad is a lot further than Chelsea's. I've just come through maybe 3 seasons now of Chelsea where every single season we were saying, this is the year we're going to develop, this is the year we're going to learn, this is the year we've got a new manager to play this system. I can understand if he's a bit fed up and going, you know what, I just want to play in one system with one manager and one club with United.
Yeah, I mean, but is United's squad actually stronger than Chelsea's? I don't know. The potential within that Chelsea squad,
a little bit less chaotic, maybe.
It's definitely less chaotic, obviously.
And there's a system set there right now.
Yeah, it's more well established. Like, you kind of know who Ten Hag is going to pick, and if Mount does join United, then I imagine he will probably be taking Eriksen's role in that midfield. That feels like what Ten Hag would want to do with him, unless he plans on pushing Bruno out to the right and having Mount in the 10 role, which is a possibility as well. But yeah, I don't know. Like, you talk about taking the emotion out of it, but I think like it's almost impossible to. It's that kind of, I don't know. Mount seemed to kind of represent that new direction that Chelsea were going in,
right.
and with him not there, you do lose a significant part of the club. But again, I think it kind of reflects where Chelsea are. Like, the club has completely changed so quickly in just a year, and clearly he's been unsettled by that. So like it's obviously been a really, really tough year for him with things away from the pitch as well. But yeah, I don't know. Like 70 million is probably as much as Chelsea are going to get for him. Man United are the kind of are probably the only club who would pay over the odds for someone with a year left on his contract. Having said that, like, yeah, this is a guy who is fully capable of hitting double figures for both goals and assists in a Premier League season. United haven't had, well, I guess Bruno Fernandes is capable of doing that, but in terms of where United lack goals in the rest of the team, that is a massively useful asset. He's obviously incredibly hardworking. He's very intelligent off the ball. Like, he doesn't seem to be... I was a bit surprised because he didn't seem to be a perfect fit in a way that I thought he would be a perfect fit at, say, Liverpool, even Arsenal. I think, he being that kind of Xhaka replacement kind of would make a little bit of sense as well. At United, he doesn't seem to be as perfect a fit, but I think if Ten Hag sees something in him, in terms of him fitting into that midfield, then I would be... I'd kind of trust him on that, and I think he could. Yeah, he seems like the sort of player who has another one or two kind of evolutions in him. So I think we could see a slightly different kind of Mason Mount at United.
Well, supposedly when he had his loan move in the Netherlands with Vitesse, Ten Hag really liked him then, and they were interested over possibly getting him in. I think it was like another loan move, but in the end he went on loan to Frank Lampard's Derby at the time. Yeah, I mean, I say with no emotion, but out of every single player, this is probably the player that every Chelsea fan has felt most connected to over the last few years. He's the guy that came through Cobham, and even in the first season when Reece James, I think, took probably a year to adapt to the Premier League, Mason Mount was the guy that just really did connect. And you're right, was pretty instant from the off. It'd be gutting, but also, like, from a fan point of view, like, understandable. This is someone who's supposedly been on about £80,000 or 60 to £80,000, and seen other guys come in on 300 plus, and supposedly been offered just over 100. So it's understandable to see why he's frustrated.
But this is why I think in years to come, like, we will look back at that first Todd Boehly transfer window, summer of 2022, and it's maybe the most catastrophic transfer window in recent memory in terms of just how much money was spent on players who didn't necessarily fit the system. And you created all those headaches, in terms of like Koulibaly coming in on those wages, and so Sterling coming in on those wages. It suddenly put, a huge amount of pressure on this Mount situation, which is, that has now led to him probably leaving the club. It's pretty mad. I think we'll only, over the next couple of years, we'll see more knock-on effects from that. Yeah. Because I think this summer,
Chilwell signed the new deal. Reece James signed the new deal under these guys. Like, I completely understand. I do get it. I do, but who knows? Maybe there's a last-minute hurrah.
Yeah. Maybe.
I don't think Chelsea are necessarily going to be bad next. Oh, what do you mean in terms of
Mason Mount's?
Well, you never know. Like Poch could,
he's the last
persuade him. But like but it's still a pretty desperate situation, especially when you got Chilwell kind of joking about it.
I did think that was really funny. I did think that was really funny.
But, do you think he actually said that though, or did Martin Brundle just kind of make that up?
I think he kind of went to go talk to him over there or something like that, and then Martin Brundle was like, "So Manchester United." What are you saying? Right. And then we saw instantly the professional footballer media side come out being like, it's been a tough season, looking forward to next year.
He's quite cheeky, Martin Brundle, anyway.
It was good. He's great crap, Martin Brundle. Okay, Well, that is Mason Mount and Manchester United discussed a little bit. I'm sure we'll talk about him much more over the coming weeks. So that deal does look like whatever happens, it's going to be sorted quite quickly.
Yeah.
By the looks of it.
A lot of people doing business very early.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay, then. We're talking about people leaving clubs, legends as well. I'm going to cut him out as a legend. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Real Madrid. Karim Benzema. See, this kind of happened over the past 7 days. It seems like Karim Benzema will be leaving Real Madrid for 14 years at the club. He's set to be joining Saudi Arabian side Al-Ittihad, I should say. According to reports, he's going to be earning 200 million euros per season. Wow. I mean, it's a lot of money. Obviously, the Saudi League are trying to expand and grow, and by doing that they're trying to get high profile names in. We saw this kind of happen a few years ago with the Chinese Super League, but they've kind of one-upped and gone and got some of even the bigger names.
It's such a shock, just because he's had a difficult year, mainly with injuries, but this is a guy that's still performing. I think only Lewandowski scored more La Liga goals than him. Like, this is a guy that last year won a Ballon d'Or. It feels like a very different scenario to the Cristiano Ronaldo going to Saudi Arabia, whose powers were clearly on the wane. Benzema last year had the best year of his career, and since Ronaldo left Real Madrid, has basically been almost single-handedly keeping them competitive, because there was a long time when Vinicius Jr. hadn't hit the levels that we are seeing now. And Benzema's been remarkable. I mean, particularly those performances in the Champions League down the stretch last year. I think that's the best run in Champions League history, and will never, ever be topped. And this was a guy that when he joined Real Madrid in 2009, I think it was about £30 million. And for the money spent on him, the fact he's, I think, now 5th on their all-time appearance list, 2nd on their all-time scorer list, the transfer couldn't have gone better. And given actually at various points he was quite criticised for being more of a facilitator than a natural goal scorer, and it looked like there was almost points where it was all going to come to an end. For him to last another 10 years beyond that point, pretty much, and finish with 5 Champions Leagues, 4 La Ligas, I think the most decorated player in Real Madrid's history, which is kind of crazy, is a remarkable achievement. And it's a bit of a shame to see someone so talented still at almost the peak of their powers go to Saudi Arabia. It'll be the same situation when Messi goes there, if he does go there. But at the same time, £200 million per season, or 200 million euros, is money you can't even comprehend. And it will, he's already incredibly wealthy, but it will change his, 10 generations of his family. It is a bit of a shame, but at the same time, what a career and what a player.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame him. He wasn't the only person as well to kind of end his Real Madrid career from quite complete opposites, to be honest. Getting brought in for over £100 million. Eden Hazard, Mikey, came out that he is terminated his contract with Real Madrid. Seems a bit meh, really, in the end. Like, it's sad. Yeah. This is a guy that was on £400,000 a week, supposedly, at Real Madrid. Yeah. And considering what his career was at Chelsea, and like it felt like when he joined Real Madrid, it was his perfect time because he kind of stayed a little bit longer than he probably wanted to at Chelsea, and then in the end he managed to get that move. It was his dream move for somebody, and he was obviously this. Watching him, and I always think over the kind of 2010s, he really was the Premier League's maybe best player, I think.
Yeah. But I don't think he was even particularly close at points as well.
He would just do things that were outrageous. And I think for a long, long time, really, throughout those like 4 or 5 years, Chelsea's game plan was just give the ball to Eden Hazard and let him do. And to be honest, I don't think it's that much of a poor game plan. It normally works. To be honest, yeah. I always think, I don't know why when I think of that, I always think about the goal against West Ham, where he dribbled past like 3 and puts in the back of the net. But it just didn't work out, Mikey, did it? And it's not through the want of trying, I don't think.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, he received a lot of criticism for turning up that first summer overweight, and it did feel like he kind of wasted his chance a bit. Obviously, injuries were a big issue there as well, but he was kind of the last Galactico, maybe the last Galactico we'll ever see in that sense, in terms of Real signing a player at their peak, maybe just about to go past their peak, as we saw with Hazard, for huge money. Like, we haven't seen them sign a player like that since. It felt like he kind of confirmed the end of that era at Real a bit. Vinicius had come in the season before. I think Rodrigo arrived in the summer of 2019 as well, and ever since then, Real have been banking on younger talents. I know, spending huge amounts of money on younger talents who are kind of proving themselves, but in terms of someone at the peak of their powers, we haven't seen that since. And it kind of goes down as one of the worst signings in recent memory for sure. And I think it's just really disappointing because it was obviously his dream move. It probably happened, like you said, a couple of years too late. But at Chelsea, and it wasn't even so much just his skill on the ball at Chelsea. Like Hazard kind of became increasingly tenacious, especially under Antonio Conte. I thought he was just so good that first season. In terms of he was just so, like he was also like doing a lot of tracking back, winning the ball,
working hard,
winning the ball kind of on the edge of his own box, and then starting moves that he would end up scoring. I remember there was a game, I think it was the 4-0 against Man United back in 2016. He was just one of the best individual performances I've seen in a Premier League game. Just in terms of everywhere that he was on the pitch. So I think he will be massively disappointed, but I don't know, it feels like almost a bit kind of shades of Gareth Bale as well. Like, was he really that up for it in those final 2 seasons? He was just named on the, you'd always see him on the bench. He'd never come on, this season. And it felt like he was just, it kind of felt like he was a bit mentally checked out from my perspective at least. But like he did have a massive payday there as well. Like, it's just a shame because he was easily one of the best players in Europe before. His kind of Belgium career as well kind of fell flat, didn't it?
Fizzled.
It just, it's a shame. But then again, this is a player who was playing at a really high level from the age of 19, 20, and was at that level up until the age of 29, 30. It's just a shame the way that it's ended.
I think sometimes, I think it's a huge. It shows you sometimes like how, depending on like your situation with the club, like at Chelsea, he was allowed to kind of just do what he wanted in training. There's always a thing that John Terry said where Hazard during training wouldn't bother.
He'd do a little,
had his shoelaces undone, would do a little bit for 5 minutes and go in. And they accepted that because on the games he'd be ridiculous. However, obviously his body failed him at Real Madrid and it just wasn't happening there. So it's incredibly sad, I think. However, doesn't diminish what he did, I think, in the Premier League and for Chelsea, and will always be a huge player for the Blues. Talking about Real Madrid and Chelsea, another player linked to Real Madrid, Kai Havertz. Obviously, this is probably to do with the whole Karim Benzema thing, him moving on. Doesn't surprise me that they've kind of gone like, oh, Benzema's now leaving very quickly. We need to try and find somebody. They've obviously got a bit of time before the window even opens. So Kai Havertz to Real Madrid, reported figures of 50 to 60 million for him. How do you feel about that transfer? Because I think Kai Havertz is still somebody who has potential. I don't think he's a number 9, which, if that's what Real Madrid are looking to do, might not quite work out. Maybe in a different system with Real Madrid and under someone like Carlo Ancelotti, he can figure him out, because obviously Carlo said that he's staying for next season, which is definitely the right move. Chelsea are supposedly open to selling him. Not a surprise, because considering they could be getting quite near to what they paid. I think they paid in the end £75 million for him. He's always been, to be fair, quite a big moment player. He obviously won the Club World Cup and other trophies as well. But I do feel like it's a deal which Chelsea fans will be saying, yes, please.
Yeah,
right absolutely. Now, I'll drive him to the airport for you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's an amazing example of falling upwards. I'm very, very surprised by this deal, to be honest. I know he was very heavily linked with Real Madrid when he was at Bayer Leverkusen. And obviously they now need to do quite a lot of work, Real Madrid, because it's not just Benzema. Asensio's left as well.
Yeah.
I think Mariano Diaz is out of contract as well. So they potentially need 2 strikers. So it might be Havertz and another player. Links with Bobby Firmino over the last couple of weeks as well. The interesting thing with Havertz, it could almost work as more of a false 9 than an out-and-out 9, because with Vinicius and Rodrigo being such lethal final third players and so pacey on the break, if he's dropping into a hole like Benzema did on occasion, well, actually quite a lot, and pulling left as well, which Benzema did so effectively, then that could be something that Havertz does. But in terms of a lethal finisher, they're chalk and cheese. Like Benzema, you'd pretty much bet your house on to score in most scenarios, if you give him enough good chances. Havertz, it feels like there's games where he's just not going to score whether he plays for 3 hours or not. And in some of the bigger games as well, particularly in the league, he doesn't have that good a record. So I do slightly worry about him being the guy that can take Real Madrid forward into this new era. Having said that, he'll work in front of an incredible midfield with so much legs. Not actually that much creativity if Modric does eventually dip out of that first 11. But with Valverde, Bellingham, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, there's so much sort of physicality to dominate in midfield. So I am incredibly surprised that Real Madrid want to do this move. But at the same time, he is on the cheaper end of a lot of these strikers, like Osman, Randal Colomwani. We're all talking about 100 million euros for these players.
Harry Kane was the other one, which we're going to move on to.
Well,
Harry Kane was the other one that was mentioned as well. Supposedly, he's the top priority. Then it came out supposedly that Daniel Levy was going to ask for something like 200 million.
Crazy.
Which for a guy with 1 year left on his deal is ridiculous to be asking for. I mean, that's reported. Whether it's actually going to be a lot less, I feel like a lot of people are kind of thinking 120 might be the kind of
they
figure.
Could even get them down on 100. I think that, at least from what I've read, Kane's that trying to price him out of the market is mainly for direct rivals, so like Man United, or just any Premier League club. Whereas with Real Madrid, they might be willing to cash in, because I think essentially they'd rather lose him for free than him to go to Man United. But to go to Real Madrid, who obviously are definitely not direct rivals at the moment, Spurs not in the Champions League, even if they were, how likely would it that they'd meet? Not so sure. So yeah, I mean, if Real Madrid can get Spurs down to like 80 or 90 million pounds, then I think it is a real possibility. But it does feel like Real's hands has been forced by the Benzema situation for sure. Like, I don't think many were expecting him to leave this summer. It has come as a bit of a shock.
I mean, Ancelotti was denying it on Friday.
Yeah, and then Benzema just kind of told him before training.
Yeah.
I think Benzema didn't even know himself before the weekend, to be honest. I don't think he would have.
Well, he put the thing up on Instagram, didn't he, saying don't believe the internet?
Yeah, I think he was clearly making up his own mind.
Fair enough.
Was probably
state shock.
Yeah, I think
looking at the numbers.
He was probably kind of in the process of making his mind up at that point. It was probably just trying to stave off the media attention.
Yeah.
Because what is 200? That's £4 million a week.
What in Saudi?
Whatever
it
is.
Is that actually what he's going to earn? Because I read some other ones where it was like £85 million or something.
Okay, I've seen 200 million, which is about £4 million a week.
Yeah,
I think it's a billion being mentioned at times. Yeah, honestly, it was crazy.
You never know, really. It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, the kind of structures of those deals in Saudi Arabia are pretty mad as it is. But yeah, with Harry Kane, I think the thing is, Harry Kane, I think, is probably the most like-for-like player you're going to find to Benzema. 100%. He's like, Kane lacks in some areas, where Benzema is brilliant, but also Benzema, Kane is a better finisher than Benzema.
Passer.
He's probably a better passer as well. I think he's not as good in terms of dribbling and stuff like that. He's not as good, but
aerially better. I think.
But in terms of what the job that he does for Spurs and the job that Benzema has been doing for Real Madrid, there are a lot of similarities. And yeah, ideally, I think Real Madrid would have, been looking to make that big signing next summer rather than this summer. But it doesn't look like Mbappe is going to leave PSG just yet. I don't know. It's a bit of a gamble because this would be one of those classic Galacticos signings. Having said that they'd never make one again. That Kane,
Kane's coming in.
Yeah. 10 minutes later, Kane's coming in. But I don't think. But I also don't think it's a player they necessarily need. Like, Benzema leaving means that getting back, winning La Liga off Barca next season becomes a tougher task for sure. But I think Bobby Firmino is a perfect signing for them. I think he is the kind of caliber of player where actually losing Benzema wouldn't necessarily diminish them, because Firmino can get that kind of output from Vinicius, from Rodrigo even. We saw how he elevated the kind of output of Mane and Salah when he was at Liverpool, and he's coming into a league where physically he's not going to be under as much pressure week in, week out. Havertz, I think, is an interesting one, but yeah, I don't think is a £60 million player at this moment in time. And also, yeah, I think especially with if they do sign Bellingham and he comes into that midfield, it feels like, I don't know, because I kind of feel like Havertz at Real, like I think one of his advantages is that he is very versatile, and you could play him as almost a kind of 10 player, but then Real Madrid don't really play with a 10, and Bellingham is going to be that kind of hybrid 8 to 10 player, I expect. And then the right hand side, I guess they're missing Asensio, so they're losing Asensio, so I guess he can provide cover on the right, but then Rodrigo and Valverde are already there. Yeah, I just don't really see where Havertz fits into that team, especially when you've got someone of the calibre of Firmino being linked, who just seems, he just seems like a much better fit.
I wonder if they're thinking like next season is all like Mbappe, and for now we need like a stopgap. But then I kind of be like, that's Firmino.
It's definitely not Kane. Yeah.
Like they do need two. They probably do need two because
so they do believe that Kai Havertz is the stopgap. And look, I know it came out that Chelsea wanted 60. I think Chelsea won't be getting 60. If that deal maybe dropped to say 40, then I think it sounds a little bit more reasonable. He's only 24, or about to turn 24. Like he's still incredibly young. He can be developed. He can learn. And this is a guy when it's so frustrating with Kai Havertz because you have seen glimpses where you go, this is a really technical and special footballer. But that is honestly at times 1 out of 15, 1 out of 20 games, and only for 20 minutes in that single game. So it will be interesting to see what happens there. I'm sure Real Madrid will sort it out and spend a lot of money. I
think the advantage that Real have is because they, in terms of their bookmaking, they've been run so well over the last few years. They're really, one of the few teams in Europe who can probably afford to take a risk like that in this market. Who knows? I think that money it's not necessarily the wisest move, but they can afford to make a move like that.
Okay, well, that is our talk about Real Madrid. Let's jump back to the Premier League. We spoke about Harry Kane. Let's talk about actually his parent club at the moment, Tottenham Hotspur, because they have obviously been looking for a manager now for a little while, close to 2 months, I feel like, or just over 2 months now. And it seems like Ange Postecoglou at Celtic is the boy that could be taking charge. Now, when this first got reported last week, honestly, Spurs fans lost their heads.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
I think the hashtag
no to
Postecoglou was trending, which is so disrespectful. Now, obviously, he's had a quite remarkable career, managing in Australia, then managing in the J-League, then finding his feet, obviously, in Scotland with Celtic. And you know what's really funny is there's actually a lot of resemblance I was reading between how Spurs fans are reacting now and how Celtic fans were reacting when he first was put in charge. Two of the club. One, they had no idea who he was. I've literally seen Spurs fans go, I've never heard of him. Why should he be our manager then? Because that's where they believe, or that's how they believe football works at times. I think they're now looking to sort out an agreement with Celtic, Spurs and Celtic, to get him into White Hart Lane, or the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as it's called. How do you feel about this? Because I think personally, Spurs fans have been really disrespectful towards him. I think he's actually had
the ones online.
The ones online. Obviously, this isn't every Spurs manager. I think he's had a very impressive career for what he's done, and he's honestly got Celtic playing incredible football. I remember Raheem Sterling, after he played, I think one of his J-League teams at Man City, said that they were one of the best teams we've ever played from passing out of the back, which obviously is pre-season. He might just be saying that anyway, but it's still a very impressive thing to hear. He's a guy who looks super impressive and is ready for that next step. I think he's ready for that next step, and I think Spurs would be lucky to get him, Mikey.
It does seem weird that there's been so much backlash. I mean, I think that what Spurs fans need to prioritise is just getting a manager in, before July. There's such a big summer on their hands, and I like Ange Postecoglou. Like, I think he's probably one of the 3 best candidates for that job. Nagelsmann clearly wasn't good. That hasn't happened. Who was the other kind of big
Luis
name?
Enrique was mentioned.
Yeah, Luis Enrique was kind of he was kind of one of Paratici's kind of preferred choices, wasn't he, Luis Enrique? But to be honest, I don't even think that Luis Enrique looked like it would be a particularly good fit at Tottenham. To be honest, like, I think that you could, in terms of his managerial career and prestige, like, Luis Enrique clearly the more successful compared to someone like Postecoglou. But is he a better fit? Like, I don't think so at all. Like Enrique has always worked has had his success at, in setups where there has previously been success, where there has been a bit of a blueprint, and he's been able to come in and kind of make his mark. But he's not been one to come in and rip everything up and start over again, which is kind of what Postecoglou needs to do. That squad needs a lot of,
especially if Harry Kane leaves.
Especially if Harry Kane leaves, that, and even if he doesn't, there is still, this is still a Spurs squad massively in transition. It's a Spurs squad which has lacked a lot of identity since Pochettino left, and that's nearly 4 years ago. They've had two managers who were brought in for that, quick success. They both failed, and this is why I kind of feel like, as a Spurs fan, you kind of want maybe someone who's a bit of an unknown, and also like Arne Slot. They didn't manage to get him, but there's nothing about what Arne Slot has done at Feyenoord, I don't think, that makes him a better candidate than Postecoglou, really. Postecoglou is also, I think, vitally, is someone, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, or maybe last week, he's someone who has had to deal with this before. Like you were saying, Celtic fans, a lot of them didn't know who he was, came in. And I think also there's a thing with Australia, a little bit similar to American managers and coaches. I think there is prejudice. There is prejudice from the UK, from UK fans, from the UK media to an Aussie coming into the Premier League and being I know how to, I know how to play football. And it's such a stupid thing, but I think it is true. I think was it Chris Sutton who a couple of years ago said something, just made some stupid remark about shrimps on the barbie or whatever. That definitely does exist, and I think that was partly why there was kind of skepticism about him when he went to Celtic, despite him having managed in different countries. But basically, he dealt with that at Celtic really quickly by implementing a great style of play at a club which was at a kind of ideological crossroads in terms of the football being played. Rangers had finally beaten them to the league title and looked like the preeminent force in Scottish football once again. He transformed that club and oversaw an amazing transformation in the club's transfer policy as well, and dealt with the media really, really well too. I think he's cut out for the Premier League personally. And I think he's just the kind of guy Spurs need. He's an underdog. He's dealt with skepticism. He can speak to the media, and I think he'll be a great manager as well. He's just the kind of jolt of new energy that club needs, I think. It might not go perfectly to begin with. I could see, the first 2-3 months being difficult, and transfer windows are never, they can be complicated at Spurs, but there is already. I think also that there's players in that squad who can be improved by him as well. So it might be that he comes in. Yeah, it might be that he comes in and suddenly, he fixes the midfield a bit. It might be comes in. I know the defense is a bit, but someone like Christian Romero, it could be that he comes in and really gets the best out of him. It might be that he comes in. It's actually, we don't need new wing backs. We're gonna go with what we've got because Postecoglou's got a plan for them. The attack, who knows? Richarlison could become that guy at centre forward.
Wouldn't shock me.
So this is obviously being very optimistic, but I don't think there's many managers out there available who want to go to Spurs, who would be able to come in and kind of fix those problems, put out a few of those fires, and hopefully recruit some really interesting undervalued players as well. That feels like where Spurs need to go. That's what Pochettino did all those years ago when Spurs were in a mini crisis of their own. They were kind of recovering from that post-Bale thing, and especially if Harry Kane leaves, they need that kind of someone to come in and do something completely new.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a video of his from when I think he was in his time in Australia, where he's just. You can understand why players end up absolutely fighting for him and why they come out and say, you know what, I absolutely adore him. Diggs, any thoughts on old Post?
Yeah, I think the reaction from the Spurs fans just probably is a reaction to the club being quite lost in the last few years. They've really gone away from that ethos of trying to play beautiful football at the expense of, or rather to just target trophies right here, right now. And yes, Postecoglou's maybe not in that mould, but I don't think Spurs, even if they hired Mourinho Conte at their peak of their powers, let alone when they did hire them. The club has regressed so significantly from where they were when Mourinho first came in. They need to depart back to where they were and what got them success in the first place under Pochettino. And I think most Spurs fans, maybe not these ones that were reacting online last week, aren't actually as bothered about the lack of trophies in the last few years. It's been the style of play they've had to watch week in, week out. And this is a guy who has a proven track record of making teams very attractive to watch, hiring or recruiting excellent young players that fit into a certain system. And he's very principled and he sticks by those principles and he's very good at getting his message across. To be honest, I can't really think of a better manager for Spurs right now because of the calibre of managers that would want the Spurs job when they've got no director of football, when they're potentially losing their best player. They're not going to want to go to Spurs. You want a manager that doesn't see they're doing Spurs a favour by taking that job, like Conte and Mourinho did. You want a manager that sees this as the peak of their career so far, which Postecoglou would, and I wish him all the best. I think he has the potential to be a very good manager for them.
Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about him plenty over the next few months or so. I want to jump over to Germany, guys, because we saw the DFB Pokal take place. RB Leipzig winning it again. Back to back, very impressive record for them. Obviously beating Frankfurt, which, you know what, it was 0-0 for a long time. Then big boy Chelsea soon-to-be player Christopher Nkunku came forward.
You must be
got
excited
a goal,
about that move.
got an assist. I mean, he really has had another. I actually think his season's maybe slightly gone a little bit under the radar slightly. Top goal scorer for in the Bundesliga, or joint top goal scorer in the Bundesliga. Been great creatively as well. Helped his team get into the Champions League. Yeah. Obviously won the cup again. I think he's had a really stellar season. He is so exciting, so exciting, and also the idea of him in Poch's like system, it excites me too. Which also maybe understandable why Mount is being looked at as possibility as accepting to go, and same with Kai Havertz, because they've already got João Felix not making that permanent, because they've got someone like Nkunku coming in. I just hope it goes well. I really do, because our attacking signings over the past few months, years, haven't gone too well. But a quick touch upon then himself and this season, and RB Leipzig as well. How do you feel they've done overall this year?
I think he's done really well, to be fair. They've had quite a few injury issues. I mean, Nkunku missed, I think it was the World Cup he missed, which I think is why his season has gone under the radar, because you didn't watch him at the World Cup. But I think, credit to Leipzig. I think it's only the second trophy in their history. They were playing a Frankfurt side that feels kind of like they're at the end of their cycle as well. Oliver Glasner's leaving this summer. Daichi Kamada's looking like he's going to go to AC Milan. There's a lot of interest in Randall Koulibaly. Evan Ndicka as well is probably going to move as well, although that's sort of gone a little bit quiet about where his exact location is going to be. But credit to Leipzig. I also thought Dominik Szoboszlai was once again just exceptional to watch.
And he's another one that could be off as well. He's another one that could be off. Those two in particular, I think, if I said to you, who do you think is the better player?
Ooh.
Szoboszlai. I know slightly different. Slightly different.
I mean, Szoboszlai's way more creative, but Nkunku's probably more electric to watch. But I think Szoboszlai... I think they've both got massive ceilings, to be honest. It's very difficult to say at the moment.
No, you are a club. It doesn't matter. You don't know what your club is in general. Needs a goal scorer, needs a creative player. Doesn't matter.
Well, for Chelsea, I'd get in an Nkunku. But for a lot of clubs, for a Man United, I think he'd be awesome at Man United. Yeah. I think he'd be brilliant at Arsenal as well, playing all those different roles so effectively. He can play, so versatile, surprisingly quick, and just an amazing technical player. Like his ball striking is just some of the best in Europe, I think. I love Szoboszlai.
Yeah. Okay, then. Let's quickly touch upon one final transfer. Well, I say rumour. It's kind of been deaded now by the looks of it. It's another one involving Chelsea, but it also involves PSG as well. Ugarte of Sporting Lisbon, or Sporting Lisbon's fame, I should say. On Friday, there were talks that he'd done the move to PSG. Then it came out on Saturday that keep an eye on Chelsea, still interested. Then Sunday, Chelsea are going to be getting him. They've going to pay, I think, a little bit more in terms of wages than they put originally. He was happy with that, and then it was deaded absolutely completely. He's going to PSG, 60 million euros. Obviously, a fantastic player. We've spoken about it a little bit on this channel. I'm sure we'll speak about him a lot more as well over the coming months too. But Mikey, do you feel like he's made the right decision in terms of going to Sporting? Does it feel maybe going to PSG, rather than Chelsea?
In some ways, yes. I think there's I think the thing is with PSG is that they are probably crying out for someone like Ugarte. I think Chelsea are as well, to be fair. I don't know, actually. I don't know. I think at PSG at least there's like a very well-defined role for him. That basically, I think he's the kind of long-term Verratti replacement at PSG. He's not as much of a passer as Verratti, but in terms of how press-resistant he is, he's a bigger tackler as well. Like, I think he will be the guy that midfield is built around in years to come. And at Chelsea, we have spoken about on this channel about how brilliant he would be as a kind of foil for Enzo Fernandez. I think either move would have been really good for him in terms of that next step in his career. He has been kind of tipped to go to an elite club since he pulled on a pair of boots at Sporting. Like they got him in on a really good deal from Uruguay. I can't remember the club, from Montevideo that he came from, but yeah, like he's only been a regular starter this season, but even last year he was leading the squad and in some cases the Portuguese league in terms of his tackle numbers, in terms of his dribble numbers. They've always been really impressive. And for a midfielder that young, that's always a really good sign, isn't it? We kind of saw those kind of numbers from Eduardo Camavinga when he first came through at Rennes at 17. And yeah, he looks physically up to the challenge of a bigger league than Portugal. So I don't know. I think either move would have been quite good for him. I think like somewhere like Liverpool would have been brilliant for him as well. But yeah, he's a really exciting prospect for PSG. But the thing is, with PSG at the moment, we don't quite know what the project looks like there in the long run. Galtier was supposed to be that guy for obvious reasons. He's left. Rumours of Nagelsmann going there, which would be pretty cool. Like, I think but equally, is PSG the kind of club that Nagelsmann wants to go to after everything that happened at Bayern?
He's got to succeed at his next one.
Yeah, like he really does.
He's under quite a lot of pressure too.
He is under a lot of pressure. So yeah, whereas at Chelsea, okay, it has been a circus for the last year, but they have a manager in there now who has a very clear kind of style of play, and is, I think ready to kind of prove himself again. He's joining a very young squad, which again has a lot to prove and has a lot of upside, whereas PSG just feels a little bit more muddled. We don't really know what that forward line is going to look like next season, and you're not playing in as rewarding a league on a week by week basis. Like Ugarte would be, I think would be chomping at the bit to play in the Premier League. Yeah. So yeah, it's a difficult one, really. I think PSG is still a great move for him, and it's not going to be the last move of his career. But yeah, in some ways, I think he would relish the Premier League more.
It does seem like he might be getting paid more for PSG, which is understandable. I mean, there's slightly worrying me, Dougie, the muddledness of the Chelsea rumours with it, because off within the space of 4 days, it doesn't really give me much confidence, if I'm being deadly honest.
It does seem a bit chaotic. What I would say is that you have seemingly overpaid for players in the last 12 months, and maybe you just thought the wages on this occasion are just too crazy and we can't match PSG's valuation. But look at the money you spent on Mudryk, both up front and promised over an entire deal just a few months ago. And Ugarte, to me, seems far more ready to hit the ground running, given the calibre of performances he's been putting in for this year, the fact that Mudryk hadn't played a lot of football because of the situation in Ukraine. But I don't think Chelsea back out of this deal unless they've got quite a good backup lined up, or other players. I mean, Moses Caicedo being linked.
That's the big name, isn't it?
So I think you'll get another player before too long.
That is the big name, Moses Caicedo. I mean, Jesus. It'll be interesting to see whether he picks us over Arsenal. Yeah. That's for sure. Okay, then. I think we're getting towards the end of Monday Vibes. One final thing we want to touch upon as well. The Women's Champions League Final. Hell of a game.
Yeah,
hell of a game, Mikey, wasn't it?
Great game, yeah. And yeah, I think a big hurdle for Barcelona to get across. They've been, one of, if not the best women's side in the world for a long time. Dominated, dominated in a way that no club in men's football really has in recent years. And yeah, just amazing to see Putellas back on the field, like even for a couple of minutes, and for her to lift the trophy at the end. 2-0 down at half time, fluffing loads of chances. It kind of felt a little bit like what we've seen from Barcelona, say last year in the Champions League final, where the wind was taken out of their sails with an early goal. But yeah, to come back in the way they did in the second half was really impressive. Also, Lucy Bronze, playing her first game back after knee surgery. There was a lot that could have gone wrong for Barcelona in that game. But yeah, great. They're deserved Champions League winners. Now won 2 of the last 3. Just great performance all round from that team.
The team to beat. That's for sure.
Great for England to have Lucy Bronze back as well.
Huge, especially for the World Cup in a few months' time. Okay, then, guys, that has been Monday Vibes. Thank you so much for joining me, Dougie and McCubbin. Only one more left after the Champions League final in the following Monday. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for all of the other content coming out on Football Daily. Of course, the guys will be talking about the Champions League final on Thursday too, on Continental Club. A big one at that. And so we'll see you guys very soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Football Daily if you haven't already. And as always, have a good Monday. I've screwed the outro there. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.